Okay, I can see me. Hey, Mike, you there? There you are. Yep. Mike, can I see me? Mike, you can see me, right?
I can see you.
Okay. Your video is going off and on, but that's all right for now. Maybe it's just on my end.
Yep, I can hear you. But
okay, I can't see you exactly very well, but we'll figure this out.
Okay.
You sound good, but your video is getting out. Mike's in the middle of a storm right now, somewhere in a curious location in Toronto. So we'll do the best we can to show you, get him going here. You want to try logging back in real quick?
No, I think as long as they can hear me, that's fine. They know what I look like.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. Okay, here we go. Let's get this thing going here. Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, July 10th, 2017.
I'm Michael Agello.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday, and usually around a different time. But we're off time-wise the next couple days because we have different people at training camps. And Mike, you are one of those people. What can you tell us about the rookie camp in Toronto? What were your experiences?
The funny thing is that, like previous years, the Leafs invited a lot of players. They have 57 players at development camp. And the ironic thing is that I think 33 have no space to sign any free agents.
Right.
So, I mean, they may sign some of these players to AHL contracts. That they may be just giving them an opportunity to play in a pro camp and talk with pro coaches. But in terms of adding a player, they really can't because they're at 48 contracts right now. Connor Brown will be 49. And they really don't have any room to do anything right now until they make a trade. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Toronto and trades for probably the next month until something actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, and that just last night I put in a blog that, from a source of mine, that said the Leafs were closing in on a big defensive upgrade, which is what they obviously are looking for. That's what they want to do.
Right.
In order to do that, they had to make moves, like you're saying. And Kasperi Kapanen was one of the guys that really is seems to be at the forefront of whatever team they're talking to. So, and I've heard that team is everybody from Chicago to Winnipeg. So, could be but Kapanen, they're going to have to give up, and there seems to be a mixture in terms of who is okay giving up Kapanen and who's not okay giving up Kapanen right now.
Well, okay, let's just say this: if it's Chicago, it's happening because Chicago has Keith, they have Seabrook. I can't see Lou Lamoriello taking on Seabrook. There was a rumor back in the day regarding Seabrook. He's making close to $7 million for another 6 years. That contract is abysmal. Even though he's a good player, he's starting on the downslope of his career. I think he's 32 years old.
Yeah.
That contract makes no sense for Toronto to take on. If it's Winnipeg, then it's probably a deal for Trouba or some, players. That would make sense. Both are right-hand shots, relatively young. Trouba's on the bridge deal. Myers is making a little over $5 million. I think both of those players would make sense. Right now, the Leafs have a boatload of right wingers. Kapanen being the guy who is penciled in as the fourth line guy. So I could see him being as part of a deal if it's for a younger player like a Trouba. It's for an older player like a Seabrook. First of all, I don't think that's going to happen. Second of all, I don't think they're moving a guy like Kapanen in a deal for Seabrook. They're only moving out salary to bring salary in because right now they're up against it and they're limited in terms of what they can do money wise and contract wise. So that's why I think it's probably, if they end up making a deal for one, and it's probably for a defenseman who's under the age of 30 and not over the age of 30.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it makes more sense. I really liked what I heard when I heard Lou Lamoriello talking a couple days ago. I know you wrote about it too, where he came out and said, the idea of getting Marleau in, getting Hainsey in, even getting Dominic Moore, these players. It's really about building some kind of. He actually described it as like hard to describe to players who are even not just the fans, but even the players who are new in the league. Because why would you get those players? But obviously, why you would get those players is really basic. You need if you don't get those players, you really do become the Edmonton Oilers, and that's talked about before. You have to have some veteran presence in with these guys. It's just the way the league works, right?
Yeah, but what you have to factor in is you bring in these veteran players to be complementary pieces to the young core group that they have, but you can't put them in situations that they're not meant to be in. Patrick Marleau, the last 4 or 5 years at least, has been a winger. He can play center, but I don't think that the Leafs traded for him to put him up the middle. There have been some rumors. Larry Brooks reported in the New York Post yesterday that the Leafs, because of their situation signing Marleau, would be interested in that the Rangers would be interested in Tyler Bozak. Okay, that's great, but if you're offering what Brooks said that the Rangers would be offering, which is Nick Holden, if I'm Lou Lamoriello, I hang up the phone and I cut the wire. Because Nick Holden, as you know, he's a 30-year-old defenseman. He had a career year last year. He's making a pretty decent, like $1.65 million. They used him in a top 4 role, and if you ask Russ, he was not suited for it. He had the second most amount of minutes on that team next to McDonough, and he was a liability for them in the playoffs. So you're going to trade Bozak, who would plug a hole for the Rangers up the middle. You're going to expect to get a younger defenseman. I'm not saying Brady Shea, but it would probably have to be something closer to Brady Shea. That's what the Leafs are looking for. And if they don't get that, they can just stand pat with what they have. But Ron Hainsey is not a top 4 defenseman. He's a bottom pairing guy. Dominic Moore is a 4th-line center. He's not a 3rd-line center. If you put these guys in the roles that they're meant to be, then you're okay. If you ask them to do more than they're capable of, then I think you're doing a disservice to your team, and I don't think that's what the Leafs are doing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that the Bozak trade, they really don't seem to have the right pieces to make that deal.
No.
I mean, this Rangers team, the team that just went out and got Shattenkirk because they were hurting defensively. They don't have an extra defenseman hanging around that they can move out to make this work. Holden is probably the best they can do, and that's not really doesn't make any sense. The one thing that's interesting though, and before we move on from the Leafs, that I've heard is this kind of you hear the 2-part things of bringing in Marleau for a couple of years, bringing in these other guys for a couple of years. One basic basis of this is the team did really well last year. We still have guys on rookie contracts. There's a little bit of going for itness of it. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of we're bringing in some big contracts because we can. We don't have to pay these guys for a couple of years. So we're going to do that. I think that's a little fascinating because this is a team that hasn't been in that mode for a very long time, and I don't think there's any fear of that anything that they're doing is sending them back in time because they're doing deals that are shorter, so they're okay.
No, I mean I here. It doesn't really hurt. It doesn't really cost you any young players to sign these veteran guys because you have the cap room right now while Matthews and Marner are on their entry-level deals. You just can't sign somebody for 4 or 5 years and expect it not to hurt the team long term. I mean, if they went out and traded for a defenseman like Jason Demers, who's got 4 years left in his contract, and that's $4.5 million, he's taking up space that on the cap that can be devoted towards younger players and towards partially towards Marner and Matthews' extension. They're not going to do that. The Marleau deal to some people in Toronto was 1 year too long, but we know at age 40, and we know with the Leafs with their history in terms of being able to bury cap space or move somebody out or do whatever, that maybe that 3rd year is not going to be a factor. But they could make another short-term move down the line. I mean, they were talking to Joe Thornton, and Joe Thornton signed a 1-year deal in San Jose for $8 million. Yeah. You telling me that next year, as a UFA with Marleau in Toronto and Bozak walking away, that Joe Thornton isn't going to be interested in signing with the Leafs for 1 year? I think
it's still and I think other players are possible too. I think Thomas Vanek is possible for this reason. Like a short term, we bring in a guy like that who can actually help, with some experience and put Vanek with skilled players. I think he would be deadly in Toronto. I really do.
I could see Thomas Vanek as an option if they trade Van Riemsdyk, because you have Marlowe as your number one left winger then, and then really you don't have another offensive guy on the left side. But the thing you also have to factor in is that they have Komarov, they have Zach Hyman, who Babcock loves, and they have Matt Martin, who he will not sit. So that's the only thing against Vanek, is the fact that Vanek would probably be taking up either Hyman or Martin's spot in the lineup. There might be room for a second offensive left winger, but right now I think it's basically going to be Marlowe and then Komarov if they trade JVR. I'm not sure about Vanek, but Vanek would make sense in some way.
And that is assuming, like you said, that Marlowe plays the left side, which I think is probably going to happen. But at the same time, it depends on what they do with Bozak. It might not be the Rangers that he's out. So at some point, Marlowe could become a center again, too. He does prefer to play center. He's a better center than either winger, I think. That's my opinion.
Right. It's possible.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into some other players here. The rumor chart. I want to do a little catch up today because we have a strange time and everything like that. We only have Mike and I, so I thought we'd do a little catch up on who is left, because I've spent the last couple of weeks, dealing with who is left and how. And it's always complicated. This year, it's just way more complicated than usual for whatever reason. Who is left this year has become pretty intense. And today I wrote about Drew Stafford. Let's get into Drew Stafford for a second. Now, Drew Stafford has had his ups and downs. I've never been a Stafford fan. I'll throw that out there. Because I really feel like he's only done well on one-year deals. He's definitely had situations where he's vanished. He was terrible in Winnipeg for a while there, in my opinion. Just doesn't do anything. And but now, Boston is where he is now, and Boston liked him a lot, and has discussed bringing him back. As has Vegas, and where Vegas bringing him in. But the real team I hear, and this team makes more sense to me than both those teams, is Ottawa, who still needs forwards. Ottawa needs scoring. Ottawa had a great run last year, but really got lucky on a lot of the with getting goals from key people at key times. I mean, Bobby Ryan played out of his mind in the playoffs. How often are you going to get those kind of points from him?
Well, I mean, Stafford, like you said, strategically had his two best years right before free agency. He had a year with Buffalo, and then he got signed to a bigger contract. He gets traded to Winnipeg, and he finishes really well with them, at least that year. Now he gets traded to Boston. He finished up well with the Bruins. You might be right. He might be the American Alex Semin.
Yeah.
But I mean, right now, the thing is, and you're seeing it with you're seeing it with other veteran free agents who are hooking up with teams. It's $1 million. It's $1 million for 1 year. You're not talking right now. I don't see anybody other than maybe Andre Markov that's going to earn more than $3.5 million in free agency. Most of the money has been spent, but you can still improve yourself by adding a player reasonable dollars. I mean, that's what happened with Vanek last year in Detroit. He signed for, I think it was $2 million with Detroit, and he was a hit there, and they got something for him in the trade market. Right. Stafford can be a good player. I mean, I would hesitate regarding Vegas unless he for a job, and and they're just looking to add bodies. But I think they can do that and actually get more assets if they make trades. There are teams who are up against it. They could trade for a player and get a draft pick. Whereas I think Stafford, I mean, Ottawa makes sense. Ottawa needs offense.
Type player though, like you would get it. You could see Vegas him having a hit year and then being moved by Vegas at the trade deadline.
Right, and he'd probably play top 6 minutes there because they really don't have a legitimate top 6 right now.
Yeah, and Ottawa has I know they have their own budget there, but they have $11 million in cap space. So, I don't know.
Well,
$2 million.
They have more budget than they used to because they lost Mark Mathot.
Right.
So that's $5 million. And did they really add anybody of significance in free agency? I don't even remember if they added anybody.
I don't think they really did add anybody. I mean, I don't think they they added Nate Thompson, right?
I think that was like $1.3 million. So
that's 1.6.
Yeah. Yeah, 1.6. So I mean, yeah, they could spend $2 million without blinking an eye. So yeah, they got money to spend. They are budget conscious, but they're going to bring in a guy like Thomas Chabot on defense and not add a veteran to replace Mathot. Now I don't think they're going to spend any more than a 1-year deal because the next big thing for them is to sign Cody Ceci to an extension. He's up after this year, so whatever they do, it's going to be a short-term thing. But it would make sense.
I mean, the Bruins though also have $13 million in cap space. I can't remember the last time the Bruins had $13 million in cap space.
Yeah, but they haven't signed Pasternak yet, so
That's right. So but he's not he's what, a $5 million player?
could be more. I mean, he could be with the escalating prices right now. He could be a $6 to $7 million player. You're paying David Backes $6 million. You're telling me you're not going to spend at least $6 million on Pasternak? It's probably going to be closer to $7 million.
Yeah, it's still $2 million for staff for the Bruins. Not a terrible deal.
No, as long as it's a 1-year deal. But there might be players out there that help them more than just bringing back Drew Stafford.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, so speaking of which, so the Islanders, my article today is, will there actually be a bidding war for John Tavares? Are we getting there? And I tried to draw the parallels between Stamkos and Tavares because we've been doing that forever, right? And Stamkos took a long time, signed like a month before there could have been a bidding war, and that was really something the Islanders want nothing to do with, right? But I thought I would have thought Tavares would have been easier to sign than Stamkos, but at the same time, the Islanders haven't done half or even a third of what the Lightning did to show Stamkos that they want to win.
And that's the reason why this hasn't been easy, because if they had a general manager like Steve Yzerman who was proactive, or if the team was in the spot that Tampa was when Stamkos' contract came up, then this probably wouldn't be difficult. But I think because the Islanders, their situation with the building in Brooklyn, the conditions at the Barclays, the uncertainty of what's going to happen in terms of a building, and the fact that the team really hasn't made any progress. And if you look at what they did, all they accomplished was, okay, you moved out an ineffective Ryan Strome for Jordan Eberle, and you moved out one of your better defensemen and replenished your draft picks. And you got rid of Grabowski and gave up a first-round pick to get rid of him. So you cleared money, but you didn't improve your team.
Yeah, no.
And that's the problem. And that is the problem here, because John Tavares, I'm sure he want to win and win a Stanley Cup. But I don't know if it's ever going to happen with that sort of dysfunctional ownership and management with the Islanders, who don't seem to, they can't get out of their own way. And the only thing he has right now to do is to threaten to leave. Now the question I have, Eck, is, if he goes into September, if he goes into training camp, is Garth Snow going to say, okay, and see if I can sign him, or is he going to trade him? Because they can't. I don't know if they can risk, if they're, if he's asking for $13 million, I don't know if they can risk, him walking away for nothing.
Yeah, they can't trade him. I mean, because they're really at the spot where they almost have to land Duchene or Galchenyuk. And the crazy thing about that is, Montreal and Colorado knows this. So, I talked to people and they said, yeah, Colorado knows what the Islanders need to do. So everybody knows what's happening. So they're getting completely highway robbed by this whole thing because they're stuck. And the crazy thing about their salary structure is, I was looking at them. They have, and there are not many teams that can say this, 10 forwards making over $2.2 million.
Right. And some of those contracts are baffling. Casey Cizikas and Cal Clutterbeck making over $3 million. That's nuts.
Yeah.
You've got
crazy, but Eberle's making more than Tavares, right? So he's he comes in at 6, Tavares is at 5.5.
Right.
Chimera, when you have 10 forwards making more than $2.2 million, that means one of your fourth liners is making more than $2.2 million, which is immediately.
Well, they have the most expensive fourth line in hockey. Their fourth line is Cizikas, Clutterbuck, and Nikolai Kulemin. Their fourth line makes $10 million.
Yeah,
so That's, I mean, now they have purportedly the best fourth line in hockey, or they did when Matt Martin was there a couple years ago. It may still be good, but it's not $10 million good.
No, and they've got, they've got a total of 14, 15, 16 players over $1 million, which not many teams can say. That's really an enormous. I mean, they've got $8 million in their goalies, and they've got Halak and Graf. It's just they know that they're so stuck having to make this deal, and I'm starting to wonder if you're going to see something like a Nick Leddy go for Duchene, like if they're going to actually have to up it and just say, listen, we got it. I mean, because Duchene himself is not cheap. They're going to have to move out money to make it happen.
Yeah, but I don't think unless not being truthful in terms of his intent of what he's looking for. I don't think Nick Leddy or Boychuk, who are their two best defensemen, does it for Duchene. They're looking for Pulock. They're looking for a young, controllable defenseman right now. Pulock, I think, is on his entry-level deal. But, and if we talk to Dan, I want to move Pulock because he's a guy who's could score from the point. He's got a big shot. He's cheap right now. He's got a lot of potential. Yeah, but that's what Colorado. They need a young defenseman who they can keep for 5 or 6 years at least. But that's not what they're. That's probably not what they're getting in an offer for Duchene. And then if that's the case, then there's not going to be a deal. And then you're going to have Matt Duchene pissed off at Colorado, and you're going to have John Tavares pissed off at the Islanders. So it's not a good situation all the way around.
And Dan thinks Galchenyuk might be tomorrow. By the way, my story tomorrow is on the Colorado Avalanche and what they've done with us. And I've spent a lot of time talking to people over there. People within the organization, people above Joe Sakic even. The story tomorrow will be pretty shocking. But so I don't want to give it away too much. But it's a little bit of a teaser. But we'll definitely be talking about it on tomorrow's podcast. But Dan Petru now, our Islanders guy, thinks that Galchenyuk might be the better fit. The difference with Galchenyuk, he's a winger, obviously, but he doesn't necessarily bring the same. He's not the guaranteed star that Matt Duchene is. If you're trying to bring in somebody to play with Tavares, if you're going to take a shot and throw somebody serious at a team, which is what they're going to have to do, you'd want to get somebody that has more of a pedigree than Galchenyuk.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, Galchenyuk's making a little under $5 million on his new deal for the next 3 years. Duchene's making $6 million for 2 more years. We know that Tavares and Duchene play together for team connection there. I mean, do I think that adding Galchenyuk would, soothe soothe Tavares in terms of his want for them to have a skilled guy playing alongside him? Possibly. I think you guarantee it with Duchene. But, you can't allow yourself to be robbed. So if Sakic is holding fast at this ridiculous price, then obviously Gar Snow is not going to do that. But he's got pressure here because maybe you're probably right. They're not going to trade him. But if it goes up to June of next year, and Tavares is saying, okay, well, you haven't made the improvements. I'll come back for 8 years, but I want $13 million. I want to be the highest paid player in the league. I don't know if the Islanders can do that. I don't know if they can afford it.
You take Tavares off this team,
then you're starting from scratch because you're in contention for the number 1 pick again because you have no core player.
And you're starting from scratch now from a position of weakness with all these contracts. That's even worse than starting from scratch, because it's just you have so many contracts to deal with, and they have been unable to get anything done, so now they're at the point where they have to do something crazy almost. That's why I think that that's why I keep thinking that Nick Leddy or Boychuk both of them are their top 2 defensemen. One of them could end up in Colorado to make this happen because there's really no other options for them right now. They can't. There's no other way of getting it done. Who apparently Colorado didn't want anyway.
Right.
I don't know that Montreal wouldn't have taken him, and they didn't get back for Hamonic anything that they needed to for Hamonic. They took their biggest asset and in my opinion,
Yes and no, because you can always get things for draft picks. So they
yeah,
could,
the draft pick doesn't mean anything for their goal of signing Tavares. You know, like
no, it doesn't. But I mean, what I'm saying is, you can get players that will convince Tavares to stay in New York for in that trade. At least you're getting value for it.
yeah.
I don't agree with trading Hamonic, and we know that Hamonic wanted to play in Western Canada, and he got his way. So they were sort of behind the eight ball, so to speak, on that one. But they did get value. In fact, I thought Garth Snow was nuts when we were at the draft asking for 2 first-round picks. He got pretty close to 2 first-round picks for Travis Hamonic. He got a first and 2 seconds. That's not a bad return.
Not a bad return if you're a team in a different situation than you are the Islanders.
Right.
If you're even, if you're a team that has been in the playoffs and is starting to fade, and Hamonic is not, and you're coming down, your window's closing, but the Islanders are supposed to be a window opening team. I mean, 2 years ago they were a playoff team that won around. Their windows, this is the whole thing. They haven't had the big run to be at the point where you trade Hamonic for draft picks. Like, that's where I'm at, And that's been Garth's history. Is he doesn't really look at the team when he makes trades, in my opinion. He looks at the way Garth is all about value, for sure. Right. Then he makes really odd choices when he has a chance to sign unrestricted free agents. He doesn't see his money. Like Andrew Ladd, $5.5 million was so ridiculous. From the moment
but that was a move made out of desperation. That was a move made. We're going to put with John Tavares, and then it didn't work the first half of the season. And when Ladd started to play better, he was playing on a different line than John Tavares. Right now, their answer for who's going to play on the line with him is young kids. It's Beauvillier. It's maybe if they move Barzal to the wing, it's
Eberle. Might play Eberle with him, but
yeah, they're definitely going to play Eberle.
Yeah, so you're getting that, but Eberle's not really. He's not, he's not really the goal scorer that you want. I mean, or the playmaker that you want. Like, Eberle is a solid all-around two-way second line player. But if you're making him to be your, I always go back to I was in Philly when Lindros was drafted here, and that was incredible for the first couple of years because he was phenomenal. Just like Tavares was awesome for the Islanders for a couple of years, right? But it never really got anywhere hockey-wise until John LeClair got here,
right?
And even though they had the crazy eights line, you remember the Recchi line, Recchi, Fedek, and Lindros, who put up a ton of numbers and a ton of points, but didn't really help the team win games.
Mm-hmm.
It was trading Recchi for LeClair and Desjardins, and LeClair made Lindros whole. Like, Tavares needs the player who's going to make him whole, and he needs that. And that's LeClair was a totally different kind of player than Eberle. I mean, Eberle's not the same kind of. LeClair was a bona fide goal scorer. He was still young at the time, but he had scored huge goals for the Canadiens in their Stanley Cup run. Remember, LeClair had an incredible could have won the Conn Smythe that year, practically. So this is just kind of some of this is kind of insane.
Well, I mean, just on that point, there are a couple players out there that might be available in trade that would fit that description. The problem is both of them are on the last year of their contracts, and that might not sway Tavares to re-sign long-term. And one of them I'm thinking of is James Neal, who's in Vegas now, and maybe Vegas doesn't want to trade him because they need somebody to play and somebody to attract the fans. And the other one is James Van Riemsdyk in Toronto. Yeah. And if you look at the fit is in terms of Van Riemsdyk going to the New York area. He's from New Jersey, and the Islanders having a bevy of defensemen, that might make some sense, but that they would have to follow up that with a signing of Van Riemsdyk, an extension of Van Riemsdyk, and who knows, maybe
but at the same time, Garceau has never been a guy who's really changed his mind on players. And from what I have heard from the beginning, as much as I've tried, because it has always been the most logical thing to think that JVR is going to end up in Allen. So you go, and I go logically, and I talk to all the people involved, and everyone says, no, that Garceau doesn't like JVR. So whether or not that changes or not is one thing. But yeah, I mean, just from if you are okay, he's a winger and he's a scorer and he could do great things and he's big and he's gotten tougher in his career. You know, I really don't. To me, like I've said many times, I don't understand why the hell the Leafs would even trade JVR. Like I think they should try to find a way to keep him, or at least run this season with him and see what happens and see what if you can make it some kind of a later move, because he's one of your few. Now they bringing in Patrick Marleau changed my opinion on that a little bit. Okay, so now you have Marleau. Now I can look at JVR as okay. You can move JVR now because you have another scoring winger like that.
Exactly.
And then that's the first thing that came to my mind, obviously, when they signed it. But would I have rather him than given JVR 2 more years for what they gave Marleau for those 2 years?
Well, the problem is JVR is 28 and he doesn't want 2 years. He wants 6.
He wants 6,
and,
right?
And that's the thing. He's 28 years old. He'll be 29 as a free agent. He wants the big deal, but chance to get it. So Toronto's not going to give that to him. I'm fairly confident in the fact that even if they were going to give him a long-term deal, it would have to probably be at less than $5 million. And he's in the current market, he could get $6.5 million because the guy scores 30 goals every year. So I don't think that's going to happen. Going to tie up that kind of money, and they're going to wait to give that to Matthews, Marner, and Nylander.
Now, a player, I haven't adjusted this on the chart yet, but I'm going to be adjusting it soon, that I've heard a little bit about this afternoon in the last 2.5 hours. Was it 5:30? Yeah, 3.5 hours. Day's going by pretty quickly. Is Andrei Markov, okay? Now, Markov, I was assuming he was representing himself. We talked about that a little bit. That could be tough, but everybody kind of assumed he was going back to the Canadiens. The rumors came out last week about him possibly going to the Bruins, and the Bruins making sense. Would he make any sense in Toronto?
He might. The problem is that the only reason I specified this is because Babcock loves left shot, right shot on all of his defensive pairings. Right. If he was a right-hand shot, I would say yes, it makes perfect sense. He's a left-hand shot. Maybe Morgan Rielly could move over. Right side before. I wouldn't rule it out. If let's just say this: if Andrei Markov is getting back at the Canadiens,
well, of course,
then
I don't think he signs out of spite. I think it's just a case of I think this is a Lou Lamoriello type signing if I've ever seen it. Like I've existed in Philly for a long time, and Lou Lamoriello likes Russians like this that are older players. I mean, obviously he brought in, Fetisov was the most fantastic one we can think of, but even beyond that, this is the kind of player that Lou loves. He's a battle-tested, solid defenseman who, does get hurt a lot, but when he's healthy, he is your shutdown guy that you put out there at the end of the games to help things out. He helps your power play. He's not going to hurt you. And it's just it would be very Lamoriello, Markov. That's why when I heard the rumor, I'm like, okay, maybe.
It's in the realm of possibility. I mean, again, the Leafs would some money space to be able to pull off that deal because they don't have the room to sign him, and right now they don't. So they would have to make whatever deal that they're going to make to clear out space before they could sign him. But it does make a bit of sense. The funny thing is, another situation makes a whole lot of sense based on players who he played with before is the Nashville Predators, but they don't really need another defenseman because they brought in Emelin. He played with Emelin in Montreal, and he's best buddies with PK Subban. And if they needed a defenseman, I mean, if Nashville made the Duchene trade, if they trade somebody to get Duchene, I could see them bring Markov in on a 1-year deal.
Yeah. The other player, Brian Campbell, I want to talk about a little bit. I don't know what you've heard about Brian Campbell, and there may have been something that happened with Brian Campbell, but I've been chasing it around, and I think Brian Campbell has still something left in the tank to add to a certain kind of team. Whether or not that team is back in Buffalo again, or whether that's in Toronto where you have a situation where you could, because he's a good teacher. That's the one thing he did the best in Florida.
Okay, I mean, well, and that's funny you mentioned Florida because now that Dale Talon is back in control, I mean, would Campbell go back to Florida? I would have thought if he was going to re-sign with Chicago that he would have re-signed already. So I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah,
But
I agree with that.
But I right now I don't think Buffalo. I mean, with Buffalo making the trade for Scandella, with them bringing in Antipin, I don't really think that there's room for Brian Campbell. I believe Brian Campbell was a right-hand shot. So again, same thing that we said with Markov.
Yeah.
You know, it would add up with Toronto. But I don't have the amount of minutes that he played last year. But I think he was more of a second pairing, and then at the end of the year, third pairing.
More of like an elder. He's definitely up there, but he's still
got something.
Situations. Yeah, he still could. If you have a lot of young defensemen, like Philadelphia could actually stand to bring in Brian Campbell, perhaps. You know, that could be something they could see. Interesting. There's a little bit of news here today. The Stars signed Radek Faksa to a 3-year, $6 million, which is I think a solid signing. I like a lot of what the Stars have done. The Stars are going to be a tough team to pick. That where are you going? Like when I was looking through my early predictions, where do you put the Dallas Stars now? You know, they've changed coaches. They have added Radulov. They have a goalie, like a really good. Their first solid goalie. I mean, this is a team that was just 2 years ago was one of the best teams in the NHL. They made themselves a lot better. They're getting healthy. They obviously had all the injuries last year. They could be a force. They really have.
I think they're the preseason favorite for the Central.
Yeah.
Because with the downturn of Chicago, St. Louis, good, but they've had a change in coaches. There's still question marks with that team in terms of depth. They've lost Shattenkirk. They still haven't signed Parayko. Nashville coming off a great season, but I'm sure there are going to be some question marks with them as well. I mean, Dallas not only added Radulov, so they added a scorer. So that solidified their defense. So now they have Mathot and Hamhuis as two veteran guys with all these young guys like Klingberg and Lindell, Alexiak. And most importantly, they added Ben Bishop. So you're not going to have the tandem of the most tandem in the history of hockey in terms of a goaltending tandem with Lehtinen and Niemi. You're going to have Bishop probably being the number one and Niemi and Lehtinen being a number two, playing 20 to 25 games.
That becomes solid all of a sudden. When Lettinen's a definite number two, that's significant.
Yeah,
I think that becomes a really solid thing. The other big news today is Lindy Ruff signing as an assistant coach for the New York Rangers. It's bizarre in some ways that he would do this, and because I really felt like Lindy Ruff was going to be the coach who was going to stick around and wait for someone to screw up. Like I felt like he was the guy. Like for example, Philadelphia. All right, I mean obviously teams that go into the season with coaches who are iffy at best, maybe Ruff behind the bench for the Flyers could be perfect at some point, but. He's got a great relationship with Briere. He still works in the Flyers organization. There's lots of things that can happen there. But the Rangers signing Ruff eliminates a lot of those teams, like the Islanders. Say Columbus has problems. There's different teams. Like a lot of those metrics, they're not going to be able to take Ruff away, as it's just they're not going to be able to ask the Rangers permission to bring him.
No.
If he's the Rangers assistant.
The coach in waiting that you're talking about is now Dave Tippett. Because after Arizona buys him out, he's the guy.
A lot of people, not a big drop off, but a pretty big drop off in a lot of people's minds.
Well, I mean, he did have some success in, I think it was Dallas, and then did have some success one or two times in Arizona. So you can't put the Arizona situation on Tippett. The funny thing is that Ruff. And I have no inside information on this, obviously, but I would assume that Ruff being brought in was a product of his relationship with Jim Schoenfeld, because Schoenfeld and him were very close back in Buffalo, back in the day when Schoenfeld was the captain of the Sabres and Ruff was a rookie player, and that was a relationship there. But, the funny thing is that, and if Russ was here, Elaine Vigneault, who knows how coaches – to teams, they get stale after a while, and maybe Ruff is in case Vigneault. Go ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
completely agree. I know I lost you for a second there, but you said Ruff is insurance for Vigneault, and I think that's absolutely true. I think that makes a ton of sense, and that's why I think this is actually a pretty brilliant move by the Rangers on lots of levels. One, keeping away, but is a great move.
Yeah, and I've had some problems with Ruff in terms of Ellis, but it may not have been all him because of the team that he was given. But you've got a veteran team still, mostly with the Rangers. They're gonna, their window to win with Quest is a couple or 3 years at the most. And if they get off to a bad start, or if there's something goes on where Vigneault, they may have to try a change.
Right.
Ruff would be right there. That would make sense.
Right. And yeah, I mean, especially for a team like the Rangers, who some people think are very, they're either very close or not close at all, but it depends who you talk to. Like they could be the next best thing, but you never really know. Or they could fall apart. They really have their loss last year was pretty devastating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really think that was unexpected in every way.
Yeah, but the problem with the Rangers right now is that you've got the goaltender, and he's starting to show his age, but he's still a great goalie. Their defense is revamped now. They got rid of Girardi. They bring in Shattenkirk. They're a little more young, mobile than they were last year. But now they really don't have, and they never really haven't had a number one center, but they really, up the middle, it's Zibanejad and Kevin Hayes and maybe JT Miller. There's no number one guy to really build around. It's sort of like a diversified offense, and sometimes that works, but I think they need that force up the middle, and I don't know how they get that, but maybe they get in the bidding for John Tavares if he hits free agency next July.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they would. I mean, that seems right up their alley. So finally, I wanted to end with something kind of fun today. There was something I saw on Reddit, which I really liked. This was point totals by jersey numbers. Okay, so Mike, what jersey number in the NHL scored the most points last year? This is crazy. I mean, this is really fascinating.
34.
34. Let's go to 34. So I'll give you what 34 had last year. 34 had 148 points only. So no.
Okay.
So the number one had 601 points. Just to let you know. Austin Matthews was by far the biggest 34.
Right. That's why I thought there was somebody else out there that was 34.
You always think of like the star numbers, like I would have gone to 19. And 19 is like a number that because when I don't know, when we were kids, 19 was the number. Like
27, maybe 27.
27. Mike nails it. That's impressive. 601 points from number 27, which is pretty significantly. It's like it's 500. Next highest was 19 with 518 points. The 27, the highest leading score with number 27.
Oh, okay, he wasn't the highest, but Galchenyuk is 27. Peter Angelo is 27.
No, this is a really surprising one. Nikolai Ehlers. I mean,
Nick Ehlers, yeah.
Ehlers, right? Nick Ehlers, right? So, but there were 24 players who were 27 last year. They averaged 25 points per player, which is pretty crazy. But look like Anders Lee, 52 points. Luch, 50 points. Dougie Hamilton, 50 points. Ehlers, like we said, 64. Jonathan Drance, 53. Galchenyuk, 44. It's just Ryan McDonough, 42. Peter Angelo, 48. That's the number, man. 27, which is not like a number really that historically in the NHL has been.
Well, I mean, Sittler, Frank Mahovlich. There have been some prominent. There have been some prominent 27s, so I think it's a number steeped in history.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I would have gone like 19. We have Jonathan Toews, and you have Backstrom, right?
Right.
Backstrom had 80 points, but Taves had 58 points. So it's like, and then after that, the next highest 19, which this is crazy, was Joe Thornton with 50. But then you go to Matthew Tkachuk with 48. So I don't know. I love this kind of stuff. I know.
Yeah.
I think there's people out there that do too, but this is kind of stuff that I fascinating.
What we should do is we should take that list and use it as a daily thing. Like here's the number whatever, and the number one guy.
I like that. Try to pick who had the most points with that number in the league. I like that. And there was a number last year that no one wore in the NHL. One number.
69.
Let's see if anyone wore 69. I think someone might have worn 69. No players wore 69. You're right. There is another one I saw. So no players wore 69. The other number that no players wore last year.
Well, 99. Number
80.
80. Okay.
Yeah, how about that? So there you have it. So anyway, pretty good stuff. Well, thanks, Mike. You'll be at the practice again tomorrow.
Yep.
And they have a scrimmage tomorrow. We'll talk to you. We're going to do the show around 4 o'clock tomorrow. I'm trying to get Tom Laidlaw to join us tomorrow. Russ will be back at some point. And thanks all, so many of you guys for watching. The stats have been incredible. And we really appreciate the fact of how many more of you are watching now than ever before. Really appreciate it. We're going to be here all summer. We're not going away. Like I said, look for my article tomorrow on the Colorado Avalanche. And the fascinating thing that's going on with them right now, which is that, there are people around the league that have really differing opinions on Joe Sakic. I'm really surprised how much he's getting mudslinged right now. That's a good term.
One thing, just because I was looking at this today, I was actually going to write about it with contract crunch right now.
Yeah.
Right now, the Colorado Avalanche, even with the guys that they have as restricted free agents, 39 contracts. Only right now, like they have 32 players signed, and then 7 guys who are RFAs. So that would be 39. That means 11 contracts underneath the 50 contract limit, which is shocking. I mean, they have to. Yeah.
That is so shocking that there probably isn't another team like within 6 or 7 of that, right?
Yeah, probably 5. Yeah, 5 or 6 exactly.
And 45 is even considered crazy low at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But to get under 40 with a team that was so terrible last year, I mean, this is what's so interesting about what's happening in Colorado, and why, if you're an Avalanche fan, what has your team done to get out of how terrible they were last year? It's and why is Joe Sakic not doing more? Well, I think I have some answers. We'll tease you out for that one tomorrow. But some interesting stuff, and we'll find out for sure. By the way, I wanted Anders Bork, who is in the Bruins development camp. There's a really interesting article by Ty on the website right now about that too. So check that out. He's apparently been showing some really interesting skills and been really surprising people with how he's a college guy who's in there.
Notre Dame. Yep.
Yep. And but is just absolutely impressed with every turn so far. So check that out. You can also check out Mike's article on Bozak and the Rangers. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow, 4 o'clock-ish. Look for that. Thank you, guys.